Hi, Jarrell. How are you? Okay, so for the lab today, oh, good. Glad to hear you're doing well. For the lab today, we are going to use Linux. So if you have a virtual machine, you can boot that. Okay. Okay, good. Thanks. Let me get live transcription. Hi, Michelle. So we are going to use Linux for our lab today. If you have that, you can boot that. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started since there might be more people joining us. Let's check out the lab from our Canvas. And today we are going to do lab 7. So in the textbook, it talks about using ftplib. Today we are going to use a slightly different library, which is called the ftpdlib. And I provided a link for you to check out the documentation. So this is the documentation for that. Okay, this is also going to be supporting the FTP server, and it's going to allow us to enable the FTP server. So what we're going to do is we are going to use a script to turn on our Linux machine to make it an FTP server. And then we are going to use the FTP server and brute force against it. And so, and see if that's actually working. Okay, and depending on the IP address, we want to use either a loopback or the actual IP address. So we'll get to that. So you're going to use Linux OS or Debian Linux or virtual machine. You can use Kali or you can use Ubuntu. Today, I'm going to use Ubuntu. So let me log in. So you can boot your Linux machine. So once you're in, what we're going to do is we are going to install. You can push update and then you can install the ftpdlib. Now the library, it talks about how it is supporting FTP server. You can use it, it is scalable. So it is slightly different than what the text is giving you. You can click on the documentation where you can find more details on how we can implement different type of servers. And then if you want to include like API and other things, this library also supported, like creating the users and so on, right? You don't have to make it all anonymous. So now what we're going to do is we are going to first install this. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and click paste. We can enter the password. And I'm going to go ahead and install. So at this step, what I'm doing is I'm installing the ftpdlib, which is a library for FTP. you can use the other library, which without the D. Okay, or this time we're going to use a slightly different library so you can understand other libraries that will work with FTP server. And then after we install the packages for that library, we are going to activate. Oh, yeah, I'm running low on disk space here on the virtual machine. Okay. Now we can simply do nano to be able to do that, or we can create. Let me see if this is gonna be working here. Yeah, so we'll just do nano ftp server.py. So let me fix that. So if you don't have the directory, you have to create the directory, and you can simply do a make dir and then do your directory. So we can just do a nano this. And so before we start putting in the script, we can take a look at what this library offers and how we are going to create the accounts. So you can manually, you can use the library and create the user account using an API, or you can manually put this in Python and be able to create that. So unlike the other library, you do have different classes that you are going to work with. It uses the authorizer to be able to authorize your user account. It also uses a handler or FTP handler in order to manage some of the components for the FTP services. And then in order for us to activate our server, we are going to use the FTP server. Okay. Now, you would start with first defining a port. So as we know that FTP uses the common port 21. So if we want to use a higher number port, we can use 2121. That makes it easy for us to track. So if you want to use 21, you can specify that here, and later on you need to make sure that you modify the other script to the port that you are setting in the first script. So whatever port that you use to activate your server, that will be the port that you would use to brute force for that server. Then so here, if you're defining a port, we can just create a variable, and that's going to store the port value. Then we are going to have an FTP user that's going to call my user or any username that you want. And then we are going to put in a password. So you can put in any type of password that you want for that account, or you can stick with the original. So whatever the password will be, you will put that into the quotation marks. Okay. Now the directory here, since we modified that, that's going to be under home. So if you want to, when you create this, it's going to put the FTP server.py in your home folder, which is your current folder here. So if you want to, after that, you can also take a look at the property. So make sure that we modified this. So I'm going to highlight that for you. Okay. And then to make sure that it is available at a certain directory. So depending on where you want to place it, so this directory has to really match where your Python script will be. Now, in the next section, it defines a main function. So in the main function, we have the authorizer, and this is an object to authorize the user account that we create, which is my user. And using that, we can then access the properties of that object by adding the user, setting the password, and setting the directory would be for that particular user account. So that means that it's going to make the account, and it's going to give the full permission to that account in order to access the directory that holds your script to be able to, use for FTP. Then we are going to have a second object called the handler. And this handler is going to give access, right, to the service from the authorizer, okay, which is the previous object. So here we're accessing the first object by using a second object, and then we're going to authorize. Okay, so that means that it's going to allow the account to be able to access the service. Then we're going to have a banner. So here is where you create a banner, and we would do a handler.banner, and whatever the banner would be, you would put that as a string there. Now we would then use the passive port for connection. So the client would then be able to use some of the passive ports. So here, basically you are setting up your passive ports, and the range that will be 60,000 to 65,535. So if you want to use a different range, you can put in the uncommon port range there. So you wanted to keep it like, so let's say if I wanted to make it 40,000, I can put 40,000 and then the ending value. So your start and your ending value. Then we can leave the address blank. That's going to refer to your host address. But if you do use a different IP address, you can specify that there. And it's going to use port 2121 that we specify at the beginning. And then to activate the server, we simply create a server. First, we need to create a server object. Then we would, because we import this in, we would use FTP server class, right, to instantiate the object. And it's going to bring in the address and the handler to be able to authorize the account. And we would set up on how many connections we want. So you can have a maximum of 256. And from a per IP, that means that from a client system, how many, or per public IP, how many access do you want? How many connections do you want? So you can specify that number there. So here we would use 256 as the max, and the per IP connection, the maximum is 5. And you can reduce that if you want less. And we want the server to be activated for a long time, forever, right? Until we tell it to stop. And then for our namespace later on, we just simply call main. Now you don't have to name it main, you can call it something else, but you just have to simply call the methods there. Okay. Any question? Okay, so once we have the script ready, after we did the installation for our library, now keep in mind that this is the path that was modified, so we want to use home. Okay. Because on our folder here, right, if you create other folder and put that there, then you want to use that specific path. So we would then use home. Let me modify this for you. And the same thing with this part right here. So make sure that wherever your file would be, that will be your correct path. Otherwise, if you don't have those folders, it's going to throw an error. Okay, any question? So let me get this going. So once I have the file written in Nano, I can click Control X. Do I want it to save it? Yes. And it's going to be ftpserver.py, enter. Okay. And for the next command that you see underneath after the script, so what we can do is we can generate a log file. And when you point with the double arrow in Linux, all that is it's going to store, it's going to create a log file. So you can have whatever log name that you want. You know, now we can consolidate that. So if you put this in, so let's see. Didn't want to do, let me see if it can port to the log real quick. Hold on 1 second, okay? Oh, I forgot. I need to modify the path real quick. Any questions so far while I'm doing this? Yes. Okay. All right, so let me reshare screen. You can use 2 terminal, but I'm only using 1. Okay, so what I did was I made sure, so one of the things that you got to watch out for when you're doing the script is you need to modify this part right here to your home. Okay. Then because when we nano that in, when we create the script here, it's going to default to the home directory. So you can cat into it, Michelle. So what you can do is you can generate. So what I did was, let me retype this. So copy this and let me change this up for you. So what we're going to do is we are going to run the server. I didn't want to copy. So you can run the server and then you can generate the log. Okay. And then it's going to show, then what we're going to do is we are going to, oh, I'm getting an interrupted signal. And it turns the socket off. But anyway. So we can do a Python 3 FTP server py, and then we can point it to the log file. And if you want to read this file, right, it's going to be massive. But, you know, if you want, you can open another terminal and read the log file. Now, in the previous, so I modified this. So what you want to do is you want to generate the log. Okay. And you can cat into it to look at the log on the second terminal, or you can view the log. Okay. So it did start it with my my original IP. It uses the asynchronous, so it's able to do that. There's no NAT resolution there for the passive ports. It says none, right? So it does track all of this here. And then it has an interrupted signal, so it stopped working there. Okay. Now, you can also check. So let me rerun it and see if it's doing something funky again. So for your passive ports, yeah, that doesn't matter because it's also a range. Okay. So if I don't run it with the log, if I just simply use it, it's actually working. So it's working here. Okay. When it generates the log, for some reason, it's tracking it, and then it's gonna, let me see if it's seeing. So here is the log file. And it doesn't track it anyway. So what you should do in this step is to just run the actual file. Okay. And then after that, we can do a net stat and we can grep 2121. So we can take a look at the actual port. So let's come back to terminal, or we can open up another terminal. Let me see if it's still activated there. Okay, so we're gonna do a net stat to check. Let me see if it's gonna track it. Okay. Yeah, because okay, so sudo apt install net tools. So in order for netstat to work, you gotta install the networking tools if you don't have that. I'll re-upload this for you as we modify it. So sudo apt install net tools. Otherwise your netstat doesn't work. And this might take a few minutes for it to go, right? I'm at 80% here. So once you install the net tools, you can use the netstat command to take a look at the port. Then we can screen capture. Now, after that, we can either use the ifconfig if we install the NetTools, or I know that they demote that command in some of the releases, or you can use IP address to look up your IP address. The reason why I have you do this is we can use a loopback address, or you can just, you can use the 000 as your host address, but you can also use an actual IP address when you plug that into the script. Okay. And this might take a little bit for NetTools to go. Okay, so now. So it tells me here that not all the processes could be identified. Non-owned process will not be shown. Will you have, okay, so let's do that. Let me see if I can get to the, because I'm not on as root. So recommended that you use a higher privilege one, but if you're on as a regular user, so okay. So for this lab, when you get your server running like this, okay, when you run that script, I'm fine with you screenshotting this, okay? And then if you run netstat, make sure that you have it as sudo, or if you are not using, if you are using like a non-root account, make sure that you use sudo. Okay, if you log in as a root account, you can run pretty much all the execution from the basic command. So what we did was we start the FTP server, and I think if you point it to the log, it didn't want to activate that, and it's going to create some issues. So just run it with just Python, and now your server is activated. Okay. Then once that occurs, then what you can do is you can make another tab. And then here, what we can do is we can find an IP address. And so for my system, of course, I can use the loopback, right? But I can refer to this address right here, and it will be different for you as you're accessing at home. So you will have 192.168.0.x. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my IP. Then I'm going to install Colorama, and all that is it's just going to give you the fancy color. It doesn't, you don't have to do it, but since we have an import statement here, we need to be able to install that, right? Otherwise, it's going to throw an error. So we would do a pip3 install. Okay. So I am now completing this step. Then I'm going to do a brute force script with Python. So I can do a nano. And you can name your file anything you want. So let's take a look at the script now. So in this script, unlike the other one, we are using the textbook suggestion for the library, which we talked about in our assignment, your ftplib. and we are going to initialize. So this is only for the Windows console. Now for your host, you can plug in your IP address, or you can use the loopback like what is shown here. So I recommend that you can test it with using your IP address. Now on this particular script, you are going to create another user account called test, and then you are going to do the port. Now, if you already want to use your FTP server from the last one that we create, you can minimize this, but you have, or you can not, you don't have to do the user account. But if you write it as it is, it's just going to make another account called test for the FTP server. And keep in mind that on this script, you're using port 21. Then for the next function, we are going to try the password, because when you brute force, basically you're testing the user test, right, with whatever the password would be. Okay, so it's going to plug in the different password from your list that you're going to use Crunch to generate. And then it's going to try to see if it can log you in or not. So in the next part, we're going to do a try and accept. So basically it's going to use that host, the port, and it's going to do the timeout if we try 5 times and it doesn't work, because most of the account policy is going to be 5, right? But unless they have lockout account policy that will be less, then we would have to modify this. So at this point, what you're going to do is you're going to try to plug in the passwords. So for your user, right, remember earlier we create the user account, my user. So instead of test, you will likely need to replace this with my user. Okay. Because on the server, that's what the account that we authorize it to use. Then, so once it tried this, so it's going to connect the server. It's going to log in using the password that's going to be generated from our list. Then if it's able to log in, then it's going to give you, or if it's not able to log in, it's going to return false. So that's going to print out, right, your credential and reset information. Okay, so if you have a correct credential, it's going to print out information. If you don't have the correct credential, okay, it's going to give you the error. Now, since we are making the system use the word list in our script, we got to make sure that we create it, and that's the next step. So where is it going to get the password? It's going to get the password from the word list file, which needs to be in the same folder or directory that you're using for your script. It's going to open the wordlist.txt. It's going to read it. Okay. And then it's going to print which word list it's trying. And as we're using the passwords from the list, right, we have to iterate through it. So we have a for loop for password and passwords, right? If it is correct, then it's going to break. Okay. So then if it's, you can also edit this to have an else statement where it would show you something that if it's not the correct password, but since we have something displayed from the earlier in the function, we can do that. Any question? I think I'm missing the main, right? Yeah, we gotta call it. 1 second. Right. Okay, let me run that and see right now. Hold on. Next. Okay, so let's talk about. So what I did was let's go back. I nano FTP root dot py. Okay, and I had modified this slightly from what you've seen on your lab. So we want to plug in the IP address that we have, where we can use the loopback. And then we would use the actual user account from the FTP, which is my user. Okay, so those are the things that was modified. Then after I have put in my script here, I'm going to do Control X, right? Yes, and then enter to save it as the file. Then we're going to do an update. And then after it updates, as we install some of the tools, we are going to install Crunch. And Crunch is used to generate or automate the generation of your text file. So what I did was I put a tutorial link for you here if you want to learn how to create text file that contains like so many different characters. For example, we can try, 8 to 12 characters word list. So you can create various type of word list or text file this way. If you visit the link, it's going to show you step by step on how to do it. Okay. So when you use Crunch, that's the step that we're at here. Okay. And if you're using other OSs, you would use this. But here it talks about how you can do like the minimum and the maximum length. So the numbers that you see there next to the Crunch command is going to be the characters, right, from the minimum and the maximum number of characters as the length. So if you want to make it longer, right, you just modify this. Now in our exercise, we're using 5 characters, right? A, B, C, D, E, F. That's where we're going to use for the combination. Now in the tutorial, it also shows you how you can use your symbols if you want to implement the symbol onto your word list. So if you simply issue something like this, this is what you're going to see, where it's going to generate, right, like so many different bytes in that file. Okay. Or it auto generates. So you can have it auto generate with Crunch via the terminal, or you can make it into a word list.txt. Okay. So here they show you how you can use parameter. If you want to use patterns, you can do that as well. So like if you're looking at a dictionary attack, right? It is just looking for, it's a match with the list. And so in the script, we can use regex, or we can use a type of matching pattern. Okay. And if you want to use your symbol, Okay, so it tells you here that for uppercase character, you can also use the uppercase character. You can also use the percentage symbol for numbers, and then you can use the hat for additional symbols. Okay, so percentage for numbers and then the hat for the symbols. Okay. So the example that they provide is there. Now, if you don't want to start with the double A, you want to start with a specific character, then you can specify that with the option S. That's for the start parameter. And then we can generate a certain, like, so for example, we can say HA, that's the word that it's going to start. So as it enumerates through and it accesses the list, you want to have a sequence of your group of your characters, so that way it would be different combination. And that's what we're using Crunch for. Okay. Now here is where we would output the file. Okay. And so in order for our program to successfully run, you have to have some kind of word list. And if your word list is not effective, you can go in and you can modify your word list again using Crunch. Okay, so that's why I include the tutorial for you. And then if you want to look at the word list, you can just simply do a cat command and the file name. And it's going to give you, now it's going to give you a lot of the details. And so below that, they show you how you can output the file with a certain parameter or a certain size. Okay. So I simply, just want to show you how you can do a word list. So here, well, after we install Crunch, let's come back here. And then I'm going to do the Crunch installation now. Then it's, after that, we will be able to use our Crunch command. I see some chat comment. If we leave the output as the same file, will it overwrite? Yes. It will overwrite the same file. But if you want to, because if in order for it to make the new file every time, you got to tell it to make a new file every time. So that means that, you have to make it loop in order for it to generate like log 1, log 2, log 3, log 4, log 5, and so on. So Michelle said, is Crunch faster than running Python script or to do the same thing? Crunch is a built-in, well, it's a package, so it is another program. But if you do already have a script to generate, I think it has the automatic option with it, so it's easier to use Crunch, where you already have like the options and everything instead of just manually programming it. But if you do have a program that automates certain text files to a certain size with the alphabet, you can. There are scripts available online to be able to do that in Python, but Linux has the tool to do that with Crunch. So what it did was it wrote, right, 7,776 lines, and it created the output. And so here what I can do is I can cat, right, word list.txt, and I can see the content inside my word list. Yeah, I think Crunch is a little faster when you don't have to manually do it. I like to use existing tool already instead of just building my own. And if there's no tool, then we can think about using Python to do that, right? And so now after you generate your list, then you can Python your script. Oh, what does it say? Okay, so it's handling error, right? So it's raising the error. So that means that my word list. Okay, so here it tells me it's trying all the A's. Okay. Let me see, there's a track back here. Server connects port timeout. Yeah, I'm getting a refused connection. Oh, but I think I have my port number incorrect. So hold on. Let's go in and fix that. Okay, so make sure that we put in port 2121 instead of port 21. Okay, this right here, because earlier the other script allows us to make the server 2121, and Michelle is correct. You have to run to terminal window concurrently like this. So as you can see, it's trying, right? It's not going to be able to guess it because I didn't really, whatever the password that I used in the last one, right? It's going to take some time in order to get there. So if you look at our first script, when we created the my user, right? This is the password. It's fairly lengthy. And I only have it enumerate for 5. So if you modify the script to make it like, a 5-character password, then you might be able to get a match. So you can intentionally test it that way, where we can modify this. Okay. So let's say if we do like A, B, C, D, E like this, or we can do A, B, B, C, and see if it will guess it. Okay. So, it's going to go for a while until it gets to the right combination. So basically it's just trying different combination based on your word list. And that's how you can make a word list in Crunch, make a Python script to brute force, and then you can write a script but if your server needs to be up and running first. You can use FTPD. Can we modify to use? Yes, you can. So if you want to use asynchronous approach, because this is low, right? It's gonna go one by one. So you can create a thread pool, or you can use multi-processing module and then write processes pool and be able to do that. Okay. So the way it is it's sequential and it's going to take a while to run through. But yes, you can definitely make it, asynchronous and assign multiple processor on your device, on your VirtualBox to do that. So for those of you, Michelle asked this because I think she had the knowledge also from CIS30E, where you would be able to do that. But the book talks about how you can make it asynchronous and also using a thread pool for several programs in various. And you can also test, right, some of the script from the textbook to see if those will also work. Okay, so let me save this file that I modified some of the things, and then I will re-upload it so you have the latest version. with the changes. Okay. So as you do that, when you run it, take a screen capture to show me that it's enumerating through and it's trying different passwords. And then at the end, were you able to, or were you successfully attempt the passwords? Yeah, if you intentionally test it with the simple password for my user, it will be able to do that. Okay. So let me get back here. Let me edit this. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this file real quick. Let me re-upload it. So you have the latest changes. Let's change this to embedded. Okay, so I highlighted some of the areas that I made modification on the script itself and some of the things that for the procedures. And this is just keep in mind that this is just for FTP, but the book did talk about how you can use SSH. One of the things that you should consider when you're doing brute force is to use burp, right? Burp works really good for FTP and SSH, and it has a graphical user interface. So what you can do as an ethical hacker or a pen tester is that you can think about how you can run a script and also, you know, on the same system or another system, depending on your system capability, you can run burp at the same time where you would be able to launch multiple attacks. And so that way you can tackle the task a little bit sooner. So if you're trying to guess the password for that server, for that user account to really see, right, if your account policy is effective for that server or if it's secured, then what, you know, you can use multiple tools or forms of scripts to be able to run against that particular system and see. And if you are getting a fast response, then we automatically know that it, you know, the level of vulnerability is much higher, where if you enumerate through it and it's not able to crack the passwords or brute force the password, then, you know, we have somewhat of a decent thing. Or when it's, you know, when it's applying certain policy, when it knocks you out where it's not able to attempt it, then we know that we would have effective policy. So this is really designed to test against either, you know, a pre-deployment server or an existing server that, you know, you were brought to access, and determine the risk level. Okay. So as you can see, we need to make sure that the server is running, and then we can test against it. Any question? So let's come back to my machine now and see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the other. Let's close this, close terminal. Let's I'm going to modify my password now so you can see. Oh, I want to do a tab. So ftproot.py. So we can, oh, I don't want that. I want to modify this password right here. X, yes. And then close this. And is it a reasonable time to let the brute force program run? Depending on, you know, if your objective is to get the password, right, you would let it run until it gets it. But if it's not able to get it, you know, after, you know, days and minutes, it depends on how much time you have on a normal brute force application, right? For example, like today I went over Cain and Abel with my CIS27 class. You know, five or more character password on Cain, if you're using only like a single processor, single core and so on, that can go for a little bit longer, right? Than what you would see with 8 characters, it says it can go for months and years. But, you know, is it real time? Not necessarily, right? So let me rerun this and see if it will be able to get it in a few minutes. Okay, and then I wanted to rerun the brute force one. And I intentionally changed my password to AABBC. And so it's probably going to go through, as this is kind of slow, right? It's going to go through maybe like a 10-15 minutes until, or maybe less, until it gets to the right combo, and it should be able to show me that it got it. So any question? So with some modification, I think our script would work. And if you use it as it was before, you just have to make sure that the directory is like how it's shown. And then if you want to generate the log file, you can, you know, make it into a log, and then be able to read it later. But it should show you the output on the screen here. Okay. Now, as we complete that, make sure that we have the appropriate screen capture to show that we did it. And then, you know, if you keep the script as it is, it's never going to get the password. But if you modify the server, okay, password, then you will be able to get that somewhere down the line. So to really answer Jarrell's question, I would let it run for about an hour and see if it will get it. And so right now, right, I'm at the AAA going to the F now. So now I'm, you know, so like maybe an hour or two, just let it run and see if it will get it. And now I'm on, you know, on this virtual machine. It's somewhat slow because I'm using a single processor. I don't have it as a, you know, multi-processor type of application. Oh, it found it. So maybe like 10 minutes. So I have it. Okay. Now, a little bit different than what you would see with the SSH is that if you test the script from the book, and it shows you how you can generate the server or activate the server and then be able to test the script. What you would see is that for the SSH, you have to make sure that you generate the key and then, you know, to be able to activate the server. And then once after that, it's going to use cryptography key base to be able to guess it. Otherwise, you know, on FTP, it's a little bit easier, and it's easier to really see and understand is that we're just enumerating through different characters for the passwords. Okay. So when you elevate the security level, when you're including the keys, you have to have the approach in how you would generate the keys, like what we talked about in our assignments or our lecture. So with that, I think I had it run for like 10 minutes and it got it. Okay, and then you can play with it and you can change up, you know, Now, if our password is out of the scope, if it's longer than the 5 characters we have, right? So you can modify your word list to make sure that it handles, right, a certain range of character. Instead of 5 to 5, we can do 8 to 12. So therefore, your word list is going to be a lot larger. Okay, so let's redo that so you can see. And I can make a second word list. I don't have to necessarily use that. So we can output it as a different file. So here we can have it crunch from 8 to 12. I wonder if we can do this. So if you don't give it a start, right, it would just assume, so what you would have is you would have a much larger file. See that? Okay, and then the lines are, yeah, I'm going to end up running out of space on my system in order to actually store that. So what I will probably have to do is, so I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 2, 4, 6, 7, H. And we can reduce that by putting in the parameter for our characters. So I'm only doing lowercase a through H. And if you look at the tutorial, it shows you how you can include number. So yeah, I'm not able to, let me see. So it won't be able to generate that because it's too large for my virtual machine. Okay. Let's try. Let's see if it will do 8 to 8 character.
Professor?
Yes.
It's so tiny we can't really see the what you're typing.
Yeah, so this is what I did. Let me copy and paste it onto the chat because copy. So this is, I'm making another word list that's 8 to 8 characters. And I was able to do that because my virtual machine is somewhat small, right? And so now I have a second word list. And so with that, I can simply go in and modify my brute force script. I can do a nano FTP brute. .py, and I can modify that to my second word list, right? If I'm using a longer password. Okay. So what you can do is you can play with changing up the password in the actual server itself to like 8 characters and then crunch it to make a word list that would contain 8 characters instead of 5 characters, like what I put in the chat. And then in your brute force script, you can just use, that second word list. In my case, it will be word list 1.text. So I would just modify the parameter. So let's coming back here. So if you have and you can have as many word lists as you wish, and you can have it read, that word list and then another word list and so on. So that way, it will just keep on going until it gets it, right? You can generate a word list with numbers. We only do A through a certain character lowercase, so we don't have uppercases added within. So if they use upper lowercase, right, our word list won't be effective. So what we can do is we can change up, right, your word list right here. If you have another word list, okay, that's not good. Or you can, and then we can play with like how we use our passwords up in the with the server. Because your brute force script is only as effective. It's only effective if your word list is effective. And there's always the relationship, right? But if you can download a bunch of different, word lists and user account information and so on, especially like from Fuzz or, repository for Fuzz, you're going to see that a lot of those developers, they have text files that contain user account and, dictionary words and so on. So when you're using an application like Kane or John the Ripper or, those, they come with a pre-built word list. So their developers actually have some of the basic word lists or the character sets saved to a text file that's already built in. So in the back, you would see it something similar to what we're writing, right, for that particular server. Now, our server has a target IP, right? It's, even though we're using our same system to test it. So if you have like a public IP for a server, that's where you would put it in. And then you would be able to, as long as you can connect to it, you would be able to attack it. So how do I know what port it's using? I can scan for its port. And in the past, we already talked about port scanner, how to use request library and other library in order to do that. So you can run a script to scan for the port and it would show you like, the operating system it's using, the port number, the platform, all of that. Then you can plug it into your script, right? So if they're using like something that for the uncommon port, you can even also set the range for your port. So in this case, we're using 2021 on our server. And so in your brute force, you would just need to make sure that that port is specified right here. Okay. Other comments or questions? Now, for the Windows, the colorama will work, right? But because we're doing Linux, so you don't really see the color and stuff like that. So you can even omit that option. It's just for the Windows, it's able to display things in color. Any question? So out of this, we can probably expand on this and do a lot more to it, right? We can have it read multiple word lists. So it's gonna go through, it's gonna read, so especially if you're doing like multi-core type of program or asynchronous program, you can have, like a certain thread or a certain process to be able to do certain things like read a file and then it will read another file in order to do the match. Okay, so you will get the result a lot quicker that way. But if you're doing it like just line by line for the sequential, it's going to be a lot slower. I think for mine, I just kept it default. It took like about less than 10 minutes to get it. So. And if you're looking at Burp, I think they also do tutorials portion for how you can use the brute force against different type of servers like FTP and SSH. So similar aspect, you're gonna have to have a destination IP. you're going to, use an account. So you would be able to plug that in, and then you also using a list. So you have to import the list into that application. So Web itself is just, it has a graphical user interface and it's easier to navigate, but running a script is definitely, if you know how to write your script, it's easy. Any question? Okay, so that's all we actually need to do for the lab for this week. And you can play with it and test out the script if you like. For tomorrow, if you have classes or school, for Thursday, there's a holiday, so Cesar Chavez, so you don't have class on Thursday. I will check messages in various times tomorrow, and I gotta catch up with some work that I need to do for the department. I need to turn in the fall schedule and such. So if you have questions or any concern, you can definitely message me. I will return to work on Friday, so I will do my normal hours and things like that on Friday. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording so I can upload. So it would be a little smaller.